Hi, I'm Loris Alexander. This is Bridge City News, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. The Carmen Gay community loses its historic hotel in an early morning fire on Sunday. Plus, one person dead and another seriously injured after a vehicle struck a power pole Saturday night on Highway 3 near Fort Macleod. And Highway 2 and 520 temporarily closed due to grass fire and gusty winds.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thanks for joining us. It was the meeting place for locals for over a century and the gathering place of the annual world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade over 3 decades. Information from the Carmen Gay Historical Society's Facebook page indicates a fire that began around 2 a.m. Sunday morning has left most of the Grange Hotel a pile of smoldering ash. Commenters on the site noted the strong wind played a significant element. So far, no injuries have been reported. Nanton RCMP say one person is dead and the other is in serious condition after striking a power pole Saturday night on Highway 810 near Fort Macleod. According to a news release, RCMP received complaints about an erratic driver around 7 p.m. A traffic stop was attempted, but the vehicle sped away toward Claire's home. The vehicle was found at 7:45 p.m. in a ditch after striking a power pole on Highway 810, which is 15 kilometers south of Highway 3 near Fort Macleod. Both occupants of the car had to be extracted by the Fort Macleod Fire Department and Emergency Medical Services. The passenger died at the scene and the driver was transported by Stars Air Ambulance with serious injuries. Anyone who may have witnessed or has any information about this incident is asked to contact the Fort Macleod RCMP at 403-553-4406 or submit a tip anonymously to Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Around 1:30 p.m. Sunday afternoon, the town of Claresholm reported that Highway 2 south from off the outskirts of Claresholm had been temporarily closed due to a grass fire and an overturned semi. As well, eastbound Highway 520 is closed at Claresholm due to blackout conditions from blowing topsoil and debris. Motorists were asked to avoid the region. Lethbridge College's Aquaculture Center of Excellence has been running since 2003. The program has seen a rise in the number of people who want to access sustainable food production in our city. As Micah Quinn explains, a new series of courses is being offered for those who are interested in training for this program.
The center specializes in aquaponics, which is an integrated system where fish and plants grow together.
Aquaponics, its simplest form, is aquaculture, raising fish in water intensively, and then plants. The plants basically take the nutrients out that the fish are putting in, and so the fish are actually feeding the plants. But a more complete, I guess, description of that is it's an ecosystem. You have the fish and the plants, but the microbes are a very big part of it, and the three work together just like you would in nature.
There are 10 new training courses in the form of micro-credentials that can be accessed by a wide variety of people.
Micro-credentials can be taken anywhere, anytime, and the way we're building them, they're going to appeal to industry that's coming and wanting to train workers for greenhouse and indoor growing type environments, but they're also at a level where they might be attractive to high school students or potentially even students a bit younger to get them excited about indoor growing and sustainable food production in different ways in general.
Dirksen says that the pandemic has shown a rise in the amount of residents who want to grow their own food sustainably.
People are realizing that why are we shipping all the way from California? If we can't get it here, we're more at risk. And people have started eating more healthy too with all COVID and being at home. They have the time to cook meals, and so you see the increase in greenhouse vegetables and fruit and that people have been buying since COVID.
For more information on the aquaponics micro-credentials, you can visit the Lethbridge College website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
For drug addicts on the street, having someone there for them can be a matter of life and death. The Sage Clan in Lethbridge patrols the city year-round, providing everything from hot meals, a needed conversation to naloxone kit. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, the group is working hard to change negative perceptions surrounding our city's most vulnerable.
Rain or shine, including days this winter below freezing, the Sage Clan delivered warm meals to the homeless. From Galt Gardens to nearby gas stations and the public library, the group delivers hand warmers and blankets. One integral part of their work is wellness checks.
And they need that safety, that connection with somebody to check on them, to say, hello, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Be safe, and just to make, just for them to see that somebody cares.
Just a simple conversation or just hanging out, having a smoke with them, they open up to you, and that's really important for their mental wellness.
Just learn about people and their stories and their personalities. There's some hilarious characters out there, keeps us laughing, keeps us smiling.
Last year saw a record number of overdose deaths in Lethbridge. In some cases, the Sage Clan arrives on scene before the first responders. The Blood Tribe Wellness Society recently provided updated training for when volunteers arrive at an emergency situation.
Those seconds matter. The lack of oxygen to the brain really matters, right? So a lot of times we have nasal sprays, which is our first when we do, and then we have the naloxone kits, which are the needles.
I'm glad that we're there for them, because without, you never know, they can die.
The nonprofit anticipates with warmer weather, they will see an increased number of homeless people downtown, men and women who they call friends.
Like everyone else, everyone that I know of in this world has struggled or is struggling in their lives, and really that's no different than anyone else.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
It's no secret that the Lethbridge Police Service has been thrown negatively into the spotlight over the past year. But the question is, how did this happen? Is this a case of poor administration in the past creating a bad culture, or a case of some members who are potentially bad apples? BCN's Jeanette ROCHER spoke with the president of the Lethbridge Police Association to get a feel for the morale and culture at LPS.
We know that there's a special amount of attention on our organization right now. And though it is uncomfortable, it is also, to some extent, necessary. I think they've been able to see the weather setting in for some time. And you can kind of tell when a storm's brewing.
A storm that could have some serious consequences, according to Lethbridge Police Association President Jay McMillan. Recently, LPS Chief Shaheen Medizadeh sent out a letter to LPS members informing them of the suspension of 5 police officers following an incident where memes had been passed around the department depicting the former administration in a negative light. Medizadeh warned there would be some rough days ahead, and according to McMillan, these rough days could include some serious forms of discipline following the hearings.
The way that discipline is designed in the Police Act or the police service regulations is to be progressive in nature. The more that someone finds themselves in trouble, the higher the temperature rises for them. And the range of discipline, not specific to these guys involved in the meme investigation, but generally speaking, the range is anything from official warning to termination.
Recapping one of our top news stories. Information from the Carmen Gay Historical Society Facebook page indicates a fire that began around 2 a.m. Sunday morning has left most of the Grange Hotel a pile of smoldering ash. Commenters on the site noted the strong wind played a significant element. So far, no injuries have been reported. And a look at weekend weather. A wind warning and snow squall watch in effect for the Lethbridge area. Partly cloudy skies, but the risk of snow squalls overnight, along with about 5 centimeters of snow and a low of -4. On Monday, risk of snow squalls early in the morning with temperatures steady near -4.
Today's weather is brought to you by ColumbianDirect.com. Café Coffee, specialty coffee from our family to yours.
Coming up, Dr. Ian Gibson is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs in Lethbridge, and he says there are certain ingredients in pet foods which can cause serious health issues for Fido or Fluffy. His Q&A with BSAN's Jeanette Rocher is coming up after the break.
Well, many of us love animals and have pets at home, but sometimes we may have more questions than answers as to how to care for them. Joining us today is Dr. Ian Gibson. He is a veterinarian with Ranch Docs Veterinary Services located just outside of Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Dr. Gibson. So good to have you on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being with you guys.
Well, why don't we start with chatting a little bit about some seasonal issues for pets since it's spring now. So everyone loves springtime, but apparently pets can also struggle with allergies. So what are the symptoms to be on the lookout for, and what is the treatment?
So springtime brings a couple more allergens to the table. We've got pollen that's decreasing, and that sort of can, if your pet does have a skin allergy, it can exacerbate it. And, pets typically want to sort of lick their feet. They often scratch their ears, lick their abdomen. They might sort of, typical to humans, also start sneezing. So that's sort of the type of signs we see. If you're dealing with sort of a skin sort of allergy, you might be okay to give your pet regular wash with shampoo, often a medicated shampoo wash. And if it's something more severe, you might want to consult your veterinarian, and there are actually specific products that we can give that can help with the allergies.
Oh, that's good to know. I know, like, we as humans often think of ourselves as getting allergies, and we don't think of the animals. The poor little guys get allergies too. I know I have a cat that often sneezes, so maybe I should get that checked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I understand another thing to be watching out for is ticks, especially this time of year. So how can we prevent ticks from attaching to our pets, and how should you deal with it if they do get ticks?
So with the warmer weather, the ticks are definitely moving, and the easiest way these days to manage ticks are they're just using a monthly tablet in dogs, and then a topical treatment in cats that also generally lasts about a month's time. And those treatments just prevent the pests from actually getting on the animal, and they can't bite the dog or the cat. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. If you forgot to give your pet maybe those treatments and there is potentially a tick on your dog, you can just kind of gently grab it close to the skin just behind the head, and you can pull it off.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty. I remember our dog back at the cabin at the lake when I was growing up, and some of those ticks got pretty nasty. So I know what you're talking about with that. Now, we all like to spoil our pets since they are members of our families, and I'll bet a lot of us actually overfeed them. So how can you tell if they're being fed too much? What kinds of problems does this cause? And what advice do you have for pet owners to stick to the right amount of food?
Yes, obesity is probably one of the most common medical conditions we see with pets, and rightfully so. It's not always easy to know exactly how much you need to feed your pet because they're not able to tell you. But the main thing you need to look at is, the condition that your pet is in. We generally say if you sort of rub on the side of their chest, you kind of want to feel the ribs if you press firmly. And that sort of gives you an idea if your pet is in a good condition. The easiest way really is to feed your animal a good quality dry food. And most of those manufacturers will actually have some sort of description on the back of the bag. And that'll sort of tell you exactly how much you need to feed your pet per day. It gets a little bit more tricky if you're feeding, table food and things, because then, it's hard to quantify how much calories are in there. And then you might have to use a bit of common sense to sort of gauge how much you should give.
Okay, any advice on what ingredients to look for in cat food or dog food to make sure that they're getting good nutrition?
Um, Once again, the manufacturers that make these foods, they're the scientists and they come up with a balanced sort of diet. I would say, a good quality veterinary approved diet. So meaning a vet has sort of looked over the ingredients and nutritionists have looked at the ingredients and they've deemed it sort of balanced. That's what I would recommend.
Okay.
There's been a slight trend in recent years to feed grain-free food, um, but there's actually a substantial amount of studies that now show that these grain-free diets are actually bad for dogs and it can lead to heart disease. So that's just something to bear in mind.
Definitely. Now, we hear differing opinions on how many times per day to feed your cat or dog. So, what is the correct answer on that one?
Most of the time, twice a day is fine, in the morning and in the evening. If you've got a little puppy and he's just a couple of weeks old, you might be better off feeding like 3 times a day. In saying that, a majority of dogs also do fine on once a day. There's not a real exact answer. It doesn't matter too much.
Okay, interesting. So, how often should pets go for a checkup at the vet?
We would definitely recommend an annual checkup at least, and that's often accompanied by, vaccinations, deworming tablets, etc. If your animal is sort of towards the later years in their lives, every 6 months might even be a good idea. Things change a lot in animals. They don't live as long, so often things change quickly. So, yeah.
So, every 6 months as the animal gets older?
Yeah, maybe towards the latter part of the life, in a dog, maybe anything upwards of 8 years. In a cat, maybe upwards of 12 years. You probably want to go for 6 monthly checkups.
Okay, interesting. Now, can you explain a little bit about parasites? What are they and how do they affect your pet? And how can we recognize it if our pet has them?
So we've got sort of two groups, external parasites, which we kind of already touched on. That's your ticks and your fleas. And then internal parasites are going to be intestinal worms mainly. And your pet can pick that up from just going to the park and sniffing around and licking things. They can pick up eggs, and the worms can actually develop in their digestive tract. So that's why we recommend, especially in the summer, to do maybe 2 dewormings. In the winter, you might be okay with just one or so.
Okay. How, in what way do they affect your pet? Does the pet act differently at all? How can you tell if he has it?
Sometimes a little bit hard to know.
Yeah.
Once the infestation gets really bad, you might see things like diarrhea as the worms irritate the inside of the gut lining. And some worms actually suck the blood out of the pets and they can sort of get anemic, so get a little bit weaker. Yeah.
Okay, so keep an eye out for that, definitely.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get to that stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, so what are the best types of treatments for these parasites? And is there a certain time of year that they come out, or are they just present all the time? It could be at any point.
Mainly in the warmer months, the warmer months. From now on, for October, that's sort of the main time that they'll be active. So you definitely want to worm your pet, probably twice during these warmer months.
Wow. Okay. Now, what about vaccinations? How important are they?
Well, they're very important and quite topical in this day and age with us dealing with our own viruses. But we recommend annual vaccinations, and then as the patients sort of get a little bit older, some of these vaccines can last for up to 3 years. We do rabies vaccinations, and then there's a parvo vaccine, and also a kennel cough vaccine for dogs. And then the cats also have their own specific vaccine.
Right. Okay. Talk to us a little bit about spaying or neutering your pet. How important is this?
Well, we all know that, all the shelters are overrun with dogs waiting for homes. So, the general recommendation, we feel like there's probably enough animals around. So that's one of the sort of reasons why you'd want to spay your animal. There's also sort of health benefits to doing that, especially sort of later in life. You know, animals often get issues towards the older years. You know, if they're intact, you know, infections in their uterus, they can get prostate issues. So there are some benefits with regards to longevity, which makes sense to do to spay your
That's
animal.
that's really interesting. What would the cost be for getting this done?
It really varies from clinic to clinic. You know, dog spay might be a couple $100, and you know, cat operations are generally a little bit less because they're a little bit easier, I guess.
Right. Now, I mean, sometimes we think of our pets as our kids. So if we are parents, we all know we need to spend time with our kids. So what about time with our pets? Does spending time with our pets improve their health?
Well, we definitely know that it improves our health, but absolutely, you know, spending good quality time with your pet at least once a day is essential. They suffer from boredom, they suffer from loneliness, and a lot of behavioral issues that develop is just due to lack of attention. They are social animals. My advice would be, you know, rather than regarding you sitting on the couch watching TV with your pet for 4 hours, as much as you feel like you're spending time with them, they will benefit more from it if you actually spend maybe 30 minutes a day of quality time where you're absolutely dedicated to them, possibly doing training exercises or going for a walk where you're just focused on them. That's been shown to be sort of more beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Can animals develop habits over boredom, like overeating, for
Um,
example?
They can, you know, if that's the only thing they can keep themselves busy with is eating, they might go down that track. Some of them develop other vices like chewing your fancy shoes or doing other things that you might not find helpful. So, you know, occupying them with things that you'd like them to be entertained with is a good idea.
Absolutely. We have a cat who's constantly sitting at the food dish meowing at us, letting her, like, we're like, well, there's no way she could still be hungry. So we're just thinking she's eating out of boredom, kind of almost like a human trait, right?
It could be, yeah. So I mean, you could always get a few little toys. Cats like little feathers and things to, and they love chasing things. So there's a bunch of things you could probably try to keep her entertained.
Really. Any advice for people who have to leave their pet at home alone all day?
Yeah, so that's a challenging, you know, aspect of owning a pet. You know, most people have to go to work. When you have a young animal, so a puppy or a kitten, they often can't deal with that separation early on in their lives, and it's important to note that, and actually try maybe go home at lunchtime, spend a bit of time with a puppy, and that way they don't develop this sort of anxiety of being alone. And towards, you know, once they mature, they're probably okay to spend the day at home, you know, alone. But you just don't want them to sort of develop this absolute separation anxiety every time you leave. So there's a little bit of training involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like little children in so many aspects, aren't they?
Very much so.
Now, what advice or precautions do you have for anyone who wants to go to the animal shelter and get a cat or dog for their child?
Yeah, so that's definitely the first place I would go and look. You know, those dogs are really waiting for a home, and there's so much of them that really deserve a home. In saying that, if you're getting a pet for your child, and you know, there's some other sort of considerations you want to take into account, depending on how small your child is. You know, a very boisterous dog might be too much for a little baby, and you might want sort of a more of a gentler pet. Um, so I would probably recommend going to the shelter, maybe spending a day there with whatever animal you're interested in, going home, thinking about it, and then maybe going again and visiting it again. And you know, it's a very big investment. You know, you're going to be having this pet in your household for the next 10, 15 years, so you really want to make sure you pick the right one. So maybe a little bit of patience before making that final decision, but um, yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and I've often heard that it's not a good idea necessarily to buy an animal at Christmas time. I think the shelters are kind of saying that that's a no-no. Why is that?
I think it's, when people get an animal, when emotions are at play, it's much the same when you sort of overrun and you buy a new Harley Davidson, and then a week later you don't really want it anymore. Um, so I think that's important for owners to realize there's a large sort of sense of responsibility when you actually get an animal, and they're going to form part of your life. A cat can live up to 20 years, and dogs can live up to 15 years. So you almost have to think years in advance. Am I still going to have the time? Am I still going to have the finances to look after this little fur baby? Yeah.
Yes, good point. Think long term with that. Any advice if you have a newborn in the house? I had heard that newborn babies, and it might not be safe to have a cat near them. Any advice on that?
It really depends on the cat. Some cats can really play rough, and they might scratch the baby, not out of bad intentions, but just playing. But you also get lots of cats that are the most gentle giants, and they'll be fine with a little baby. I don't think there's any health issues besides maybe.
Maybe it was an old wives' tale. I had heard that cats like to maybe lay across them because of the warmth and it could suffocate them. So,
Not that I've heard.
all right. Well, it looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Gibson.
No, it's a pleasure. It was good chatting to you guys.
Well, we all want to be in great shape and have nice bodies, so we try fad diets and start to exercise, but often it doesn't last long before we give up. How can we find a way to get fit, stick to it, and stay fit? Joining us today to chat about this is Shane Garner, owner of Anytime Fitness, right here in Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News, Shane.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, can you tell us a bit about what kind of a gym Anytime Fitness is? Do you do personal training or do you do classes?
Absolutely. So we're a commercial gym. We're located at 338 University Drive West. So that'd be right across the street from Save On Foods on the west side. We're a commercial gym with 24-hour access. We offer memberships, personal training, group training, supplements, and nutrition programs. And really the thing that we try to differentiate ourselves from other commercial gyms is we're the club that coaches, cares, and connects. And what that means basically is when someone comes through the front door, there's resources available regardless of skill level. So if you just come through the front door and you're good to go and you just want to work out, obviously that's great. We can accommodate you. But if somebody comes in and maybe they've never stepped foot into a gym and they need all the resources that we can offer, that's perfect too, because we have a platform that can assist them. And really that's it, right? Is we try to be a club that can accommodate all skill levels, because sometimes coming to the gym is quite scary and it's intimidating, and we just try to remove that whole aspect of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what age groups are able to participate with you?
Anywhere from 14 to unlimited. And we really do see, being on the west side, we see all age groups, all demographics, all body sizes, all body shapes, all different levels of experiences. And that's really what we are. We're the neighborhood gym. So in saying that, we get the neighborhood.
That's awesome. Now, I'm guessing that it's been a financial challenge for gym owners with COVID restrictions in place. So as someone who sees this firsthand every day, would you say gyms are at least as safe as shopping at local grocery stores?
Well, obviously I'm a bit biased, but for the general public that maybe don't know what all goes on, I would say obviously yes. The reason I'd say yes is because of the level of cleanliness and safety that's been regulated by the government for us, but also because of the standard that members expect from us. So with so much media coverage on what's going on, the expectations are very high for us to conduct ourselves in a professional manner. We've always prided ourselves on operating a really clean, organized, tidy gym, but with the COVID restrictions coming onto the scene, obviously things have been heightened to another level. And members already wipe equipment, before they use it, after they use it, but really it was the education on our staff to accommodate the new regulations. So I mean, our staff members are sanitizing high touch points every 45 minutes, like handles, railings, that kind of stuff. We're even we bought a bunch of commercial fogging machines. And we've just openly invited AHS to also come and tour the facility and make sure that we're compliant, we're doing everything right, and we're protecting the members. And I mean, for us, we had over 25,000 visits over a 6-month period, and we've had no COVID-related cases. So, I mean, we're doing our very best. And I mean, the industry as a whole is doing quite well as well.
That's amazing. You guys are right on top of it. I absolutely love it. So speaking of physical fitness, so where are we at in Southern Alberta? How do we generally score on the physical fitness report card?
We're doing a lot better, especially in the last 5 years. Like regardless of area or demographics, but the awareness of just health and wellness by people generally is something that's definitely becoming more and more conscious for people, and people are definitely taking active steps to making healthy life changes. And then those are obviously, from the extreme all the way to, I mean, a lot of people are just starting to move, right? They're just becoming conscious that they can no longer live this lifestyle and they need to improve it. And they're making small, subtle changes that are, definitely a step in the right direction.
Right. Now, there might be some people out there who say, hey, I don't exercise all that much. It's not a big deal. But if we're not getting regular exercise, how does this impact our physical and our mental health?
The way we try to explain this to people, because I mean, that's a common attitude. I mean, first and foremost, like the human body, I mean, just as a system, I mean, it's made to move, right? It's made to lift and walk and stretch and be under load. I mean, it's not really made to sit in a chair for 8 hours a day. It's not made to eat all the processed food, which is really common in the lifestyles we live today. And I mean, obviously there's physical and the mental side of that it helps a lot to have active lifestyles. But I mean, the kind of our takeaway with a lot of people is, you either make time for your wellness or you'll be forced to make time for illness. So that seems to resonate with people a lot. And it's so true is, you've got to look after yourself or, there were consequences down the line. So, I mean, nobody wants to do that. So that's why, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, it seems like a lot more people are becoming conscious of that and making the lifestyle changes.
So important. So what stops people from maybe getting started? Is it personal fears that it might be too hard, or that it'll take up too much of their time, or they won't see results for their money?
I think all of those, what you mentioned, are to some degree, but the most prominent one, it's the scared, fear, intimidation. I'm sure you've heard it. We hear it all the time. Is people are like, "Oh, I just need to get in shape before I come to the gym." It sounds silly, but it's true. A lot of people end up doing that, or thinking that's the mentality they need to show up in shape. The amount of people we've had too that, I mean, they sit in their cars and they contemplate for 20 minutes before stepping through the doors is another thing. And it's just the fear of maybe they're going to be embarrassed. I mean, maybe they're going to be ridiculed, maybe all these negative things. And I think that's one of the biggest things that stop people from coming through the doors. And it's not true. When people come through the front door, most commercial fitness is, obviously Anytime Fitness, but I think most people would be surprised at how accommodating most commercial fitness facilities are. And when they do come through the front doors, even if they are scared, intimidated, maybe they've never set foot in a commercial fitness center, is they all are quite accommodating regardless of skill level. And they usually can accommodate you with a variety of products. So it's really just that getting yourself through the door is the hardest part.
I think you're right. I think that intimidation factor might be what it is, because you picture a gym with all these beautiful buff people, right? And if you think, well, that's not me, yeah, I totally understand that. But I've been attending gyms for all my life, and for the most part, like I've never seen anyone really look down on anybody else. So,
and as you know, like, I mean, the majority of people that are working out, I mean, they're just normal people, right? People get the mental image that there's just a bunch of tan, jacked, beautiful people.
Exactly.
But
yeah,
it's not the case.
It's not.
just everyday normal people like you and I, just trying to get in better shape.
Absolutely. Now, what do you recommend for someone who wants to just get started and who wants to keep it simple?
You know, it depends on the obviously the level of experience and level of current physical activity and all that. But I mean, just average Joe just looking to get in better shape and maybe have never entertained an active lifestyle, it's really just moving, just start moving. You know, a recommendation we always make for people that are just starting to get into it is everyone carries a cell phone around them. It already usually tracks your steps for you. And even just tracking your steps is a step in the right direction. For most people that are just getting into it, is we tell people to aim for about 3,500 steps a day. Maybe if you're a bit more advanced, then shooting for 5,000 steps a day. And then things like, maybe they don't want to come to a gym quite yet, but using your body weight for exercises, things like jumping jacks or body weight squats or stretching. And again, just using your body for what it's meant for. And of course, making healthier food choices is another one that we would recommend.
Right, absolutely. And that's all stuff you can do in the privacy of your own home too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. Now, how important is the cardiovascular part of an exercise plan, and what would be some good alternatives to running for those that might have some joint issues?
For the jogging, because that's another one, right? Where people think, well, I'm gonna get in shape, I'll start running. And running is quite advanced for the majority of people. It's usually not the recommendation we make. It usually can be quite hard on the body, especially if it's untrained. So we usually don't recommend jogging, and it's rarely a good fit for most people, especially people that have been inactive. But other alternatives, like I said, would be like walking is a really good start. Walking with an incline, if you do have access to a treadmill, is a really good start to start challenging yourself. If you do have pre-existing hip, knee, joint concerns or issues, is like ellipticals would be another one. It's very low impact. Steppers, swimming, biking. Those are all really good choices to kind of exchange for the jogging. And usually, typically, people work themselves up to running, but it can be very hard on you if you're just going from a completely inactive lifestyle to jogging, and then it kind of makes you feel beat up and tired, and maybe you're not going to have that for the long duration, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, any advice on how to go about developing muscle building routines without injuring yourself, and also how important is it to build muscles?
Yeah, for as far as like developing a routine, obviously, you know, everyone has access to the internet. Sometimes with the internet, there's almost an overabundance of information. It's hard to sort it all through what you should be doing. We offer the Anytime Fitness app. It has 4,000 workouts on it for a variety of skill levels. But that's something we can help you with. I mean, people can reach out to us, or like I said, log online. I mean, some of the things that people are going to notice, especially as they age, is increasing bone density. It can recharge the metabolism and increase the capacity, enhancing mental health. We talked about that a little bit. And then just reversing physical frailty. I mean, it goes back to us talking about the human body is just made to, exert and be under load. So those are the things you're going to notice, and especially as people age, it's so important to keep some sort of healthy, active lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned aging, so I know muscles obviously develop more easily when you are young, but older people should try to build muscles too. So what would you recommend for like a senior citizen, how to get started on that?
Really, it's going back to what we originally talked about. So if someone is classified as a senior citizen and maybe they don't have a prior experience, it's getting back into that movement, right? Is getting into some walking, tracking the steps, just starting with some very moderate body weight exercises, and of course, making healthy decisions. But the biggest aspect there is to not go too hard, too much, too fast. And if somebody is venturing out and they're trying to get into shape, I think another really key component is asking for advice, and just make sure that advice is backed up by someone with some experience, because there's lots of advice out there. Some of it's poor, some of it's phenomenal. Just make sure you've got the proper advice as well.
That's great. And then on the flip side, at what age can youngsters start using weights while being safe, of course?
Yeah, typically 14 is there's some, again, this is a really highly debated subject, and there's quite a bit of science coming into play here. But typically what we recommend is if 14 and over to begin, you can begin to start weight training. We don't recommend any large loads being placed in the body younger than that. And then as people progress into the 15, 16, 17, then obviously the amount of intensity and loads increase as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's better, to do lower reps with heavier weights or more reps with less weight? What works better?
I would say it depends.
Okay.
It depends on the goal. So science says reps 1 to 5 are going to be the most beneficial for strength building.
Okay.
Science says reps for 6 to 12 are going to be the most beneficial for muscle building.
Okay.
And then reps 12 to 20 are going to be the most beneficial for training a muscle for performing under load for duration or endurance. So it really depends on the goal, but typically most people are going to fall in that 6 to 12 range because they're trying to get the muscle stronger, a little bit bigger, probably look a little bit better as one of the goals. And that's usually what we recommend.
Okay. Now, if somebody is overweight, how can they start doing exercises safely? What do you recommend for that?
A lot of, again, if overweight and inactive, again, a really good place to start maybe building the confidence and even just kind of learning your body of what it's capable of and what it's not capable of at the moment is, again, just going back to that movement, is start moving, start getting out there, tracking your steps, and just start building that foundation so that you start to explore your body and realize what it, and then as you do that, you're going to gain confidence and you're going to want to gradually move into a commercial facility. I'm not saying that's the only way, but that's really a typical way to do it. I mean, I don't want to paint the wrong image either. And of course, you can just show up to a commercial fitness facility and they'll be glad to have you and they'll accommodate you too. So the nice part about that is you're going to get the expert advice right out of the gate. But it just depends on the comfort level.
Right. And of course, we want to encourage viewers who might be struggling in this area. So do you have any clients at Anytime Fitness who maybe defied the odds and have lost a significant amount of weight? Any success stories?
So weight loss is one of our specialties there. We've actually had multiple examples of clients losing over 100 pounds. And the 100 pounds is obviously significant. But what's more significant is you literally see people transform their personalities, their confidence, their energy levels, everything, even all the way down to like the relationship with their spouse or their kids. I mean, it can be life changing. So yeah, I mean, we do have multiple examples of that. I mean, we do have examples of that with pictures in the club if anyone's interested and want to discuss that further. Yeah, it's really, I just can't get over how that's one of the most exciting aspects of being part of this.
That's amazing. It looks like we are out of time, but thanks so much for being with us today, Shane. Shane Garner is the owner of Anytime Fitness here in Lethbridge. We appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.
A number of surveys are showing that married couples say the pandemic has increased stress levels on their marriage. What's interesting and somewhat strange, though, is that a number of major media outlets have been making a case that divorce in the COVID-19 era is actually a good thing. Joining me to discuss this is Kimberly Holmes. She's the CEO of Marriage Helper, and she is joining me via Zoom from Nashville, Tennessee. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeanette. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Kimberly, can you first of all share a bit about yourself and about Marriage Helper?
Absolutely. So the best way I can explain about me is by giving you a little bit of the backstory of how Marriage Helper got started. And our founder, Dr. Joe Beam, and his wife, they had been married for about 15 years back in the 1980s before he decided that he felt like he could be happier with someone else and in a different situation. And he actually divorced his wife and left her and her 2 children. And they were divorced for 3 years. And during that 3 years, Dr. Beam himself would tell you that he became a person that he honestly didn't even like anymore. He went places he never thought he'd go, did things he never thought he'd do. And one day woke up and said, "What have I done?" He actually called his ex-wife back, her name is Alice, and asked her if she would take him back, to which she said, "No, I don't know. I mean, everyone in her life told her not to. Her family was saying, you're already divorced. Why would you go back to this? How do you know you can trust him again?" But ultimately, Alice said to herself, "Do I believe that Joe, Dr. Beam, is a good person who has done some bad things? Or do I believe that he is a bad person who has done bad things? And she knew at her core that he was a good man. And she believed it was the right thing to do to take him back and to see if they could make it work. They remarried, and at first they did not love each other, but they figured out how to fall back in love with each other. And as a result, in celebration of that second marriage, they had a third daughter, which is me. And so I actually am a product of two people who were divorced, all odds against them, but saving their marriage. And from their story, they said, how can we help people who are either going through this, or how can we help people so that they don't have to go through this? And so in 1999, my parents developed, my dad specifically, a 3-day workshop that has been around for over 20 years now and has over a 70% success rate at saving marriages. And I got involved after college, never thought I would go into this. That wasn't a plan of mine, but I caught the vision of the marriages that could be saved and the hope that needs to be put out there. And so I've been with Marriage Helper for 9 years now, and I owe my life to what Marriage Helper has done, but I've also been able to see thousands of people save their marriage and leave a legacy for their family as well.
Yeah, no kidding. And you obviously know firsthand about that coming from that family, and you probably saw things from a completely different perspective, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And another part of it is it's interesting that my sisters and I both have the same set of parents, but I have never experienced divorce and my sisters have. And you see the effects of that in the way that we live our lives, even though my family is close and my sisters have forgiven my father and we are a close family now, there were still effects of what happened during those 3 years that are just there. And so I see firsthand how divorce affects children. And I also see how I wasn't affected by it. And I have to tell you, I am passionate about helping children not have to experience that if they don't have to.
Yeah, it's interesting how you and your sisters have such different experiences with that, because they actually went through the divorce with their parents, whereas you were the product of it afterwards. So now for viewers watching who might be divorced, this of course isn't about condemning anyone, right? But it does seem strange that some media outlets have been arguing that divorce in this COVID-19 era is actually a good thing. So what exactly do you believe is beneficial about it?
Well, let's talk about what the message is that's out there, because like you said, divorce, even for people who don't want it, sometimes is going to happen. And that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about this message out there that is saying divorce is a first option, right? Like if you aren't happy or if you're too stressed out, then perhaps this is the next step for you. Just divorce, like it's an easy decision. Just divorce, and then you'll have 2 weeks to be completely focused on your work, to self-care, to get your massages, to do all the things, and then you can have 2 weeks to be a present parent. And that's just the new way to live your life. And there was a lot of articles in the past year that have gone out that have really been promoting this as an option. And that is what I believe we have to look out at and say, research doesn't support this. Research, if we were to actually believe what we see of how divorce affects children and how divorce affects individuals, then we should know that we should do things to try and save the marriage before choosing to end it. And of course, there are people who are going to do those things to try and save the marriage, and the divorce still may happen. But at least when people have tried to save it and they can look at themselves at the end of it and say, I know I did everything I could, what we have seen is those people end up having a better future anyway for themselves as an individual, because they have learned how to be the best that they can be individually.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned children, of course. So is there any evidence that divorce could be good for kids, or evidence on the other side that it's got negative outcomes? I mean, there must be lots of research about this, and I'm sure you've looked at it all.
Yes, there is. I actually did my master's thesis in how divorce affects children. And so I've looked at the research, and a couple of the longitudinal studies are really interesting. And they say that when parents are fighting, and a lot of the narrative that we hear is, well, it's better for kids because they don't need to be in a home of parents who research calls high conflict, but basically the parents who they fight all the time. And here's what's true. The best thing for children, according to the research, is that the parents learn how to work through things and fix their problems, especially for the children who watch that happen. This is the best thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen for children is that parents divorce and continue to fight. How often is that what happens though? Where they do end up divorcing, but they still haven't worked through their issues. They still aren't co-parenting where they like each other, where they're amicable, where all of those things are happening. And that's the worst thing that can happen for children. So regardless of what happens, the two parents, when they're going to be co-parenting, have got to figure out how to co-parent well and to be friendly to each other and resolve their differences.
Absolutely. Now, you say that couples who take the time to invest in their marriages and get good counseling have a much higher rate of staying married.
Yes, absolutely. You know, a lot of people, I have seen it with the thousands we've worked with at Marriage Helper, when they come to us and they say, but there's just no hope. Our counselor has told us there's no hope, our pastor, our friends, our family, whoever it is. So I just don't know if this will work. I believe one of the obstacles for most people to even getting help in the first place is they just believe there's no hope, because they don't see in their direct life, their friends or family, they don't see the struggles people go through and work through. And so when we experience in the walls of our home, where there's a disconnection between our spouse, there's no intimacy anymore, there's no more romance, no more passion, there's a lot of fighting, you can feel alone in that and you don't know what to do. And so what we have seen is when people at least begin to take that first step, and even if it's just one person to begin with, because it can just start with one person to begin to save the marriage. But even when they just begin to start that and get help and figure out what are the things I need to do for me, but also the best things to do to set a foundation to bring my marriage back together. But it's going to be helpful for me to know either way. We see so many times that it ends up being what saves their marriage, even if they thought at first that there was no hope for them.
Yeah, that's unreal. So why do couples choose not to get marriage help? Is it considered a stigma? Are they scared?
I think part of it. You know, there's a lot of reasons. One of the studies I even read just a couple of weeks ago talked about how, because the stigma of counseling and getting marriage help was so high, that most couples, over 60% of them, wait for 6 years after problems have started before they actually reach out to get help. And by that point, things haven't gotten better, right? Nothing gets better when you just let it simmer for 6 years. Things have only gotten worse. And so it can build up so much that not only is there stigma, but they're having to really say to themselves, is there something wrong with me? Or they're having to ask, did I marry the right person? All of these things which just go into, it's a lot, it's very vulnerable when you get to that point, right? And a lot of people, they don't know, and also they don't know who to trust or who to go to. That's another huge part of it. And what we have found is that counseling, even if you look at the Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, that for couples who are in crisis, even their noted gold standard of success rate after a year of working with them is 50%. And after 2 to 3 years, it goes down to 30%. Because counseling can be very, very difficult. You have two couples or two people who are going in and talking with a counselor, and one of them doesn't want to be there. It's very easy for that person to shut down, to feel like they're being attacked, and to just kind of go along for the ride, but say, none of this applies to me. I don't want to be here. Which is why we're finding more and more that more of these group-based activities like seminars or conferences can be really effective, because it doesn't feel as focused on just the person who doesn't want to be there. It's for the group. And so you're able to hear it in a way differently than if you're just sitting in a counseling session.
Yeah, and not only that, it probably opens their eyes to, hey, we're not the only ones. Like, these other people have similar problems that we do, or other problems that, wow, I'm glad that's not us, right? We're not that bad after all. I'm sure you've seen all kinds of stuff in your group sessions.
Everything. I mean, I tell people all the time, there's nothing at this point you could tell me that I have not heard, because we've seen it all, and we've seen all of those types of situations stay.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about COVID for a minute here. So oddly enough, a survey by Bowling Green State University revealed a surprise that divorce rates in the number of U.S. states this COVID time actually dropped. So they're looking at divorce rates dropping. So analysts believe that it may be due to couples simply delaying divorce for practical reasons during the pandemic. What are your thoughts on this, Kimberly?
I think like many of those people, that there could be a lot of reasons. And even when we look at research, you have to look at it. It's so many angles. So could it be because of all the shutdowns? I know that many of the people who contacted us, they said courts were closed for a long period of time. And so their divorce proceedings ended up getting delayed. But there's also part of this that, and I would love to see that because couples were stuck together, it forced them to work on issues in a healthy way and they got healthier. I think that would be amazing.
And Kimberly, any final advice to anyone watching who has a marriage just hanging by a thread?
My best advice that I would give you is to please not give up hope. Because while what you're experiencing, I know hurts and you're confused. You don't know who to trust. You don't know where to go. What I want to encourage you with is that there are things that you can begin to do. You can begin by working on yourself, becoming the best that you can be, and then also learning how to change the way that you communicate with your husband or with your wife, because those are the two things that begin to break down when marriages begin to break down. We lose sight of ourselves. We start focusing on our spouse and overanalyzing the relationship, getting our anxiety up, but we also lose sight of how to communicate well. And these are two important things that you can begin doing right now, no matter what your spouse is doing, no matter what they're focused on, no matter how they're responding.
That is some great advice there. Kimberly Holmes is the CEO of Marriage Helper. Thanks so much for your time today, Kimberly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I really appreciated being with you.
Absolutely. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.